Yeah, want me to sit down? Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Daria Shapovalova. I work as a senior lecturer in energy law at the University of Aberdeen. I'm also one of the coordinators at the Just Transition Lab, which is an interdisciplinary group at the university, and I direct the Center for Energy Law as well. So at the Just Transition Lab, what we do is we try to bring people from different disciplines together, from economics, geography, law, geosciences, and try to tackle just transition as a complex issue. And my colleague Tavis came up with a very good working definition of just transition, which is don't shaft people, and we like it a lot. I think we'll put it on t-shirts. But that essentially is what we think just transition means, is when we are moving into a low carbon future, that we do it in a way that distributes burdens and benefits of transitions in a fair way. So we received some funding from Uplift, which is a climate environmental NGO, who asked us, can you tell us, how can you operationalize just transition? How can you take this very big term and make it make sense within the context of Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire? So we had a project for a couple of years that Elliot has been saying earlier about the difficulty in measuring just transition. Well, that's exactly what we try to do for the Northeast. I have only 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go through our 100-page report, but it's available online, and we have printed copies that we're very happy to distribute as well. So if you have any questions, you would like to see the report, or you'd like a printed copy, please do just email or come up to me after, and we can arrange that. So what we've done first is we've done the first report that is called the Rapid Evidence Assessment, which is just fancy word for a very big literature review. We looked at everything that's been published between 1960s and today about just transition, workers, communities, transition in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. So spent lots of days at the library, working with old newspapers and everything that's been talked about today. And we came up with this report of how has oil and gas industry shaped the region, shaped Aberdeen. And we talked about a lot of very positive things that have happened with the average earnings and average employment being higher than the rest of the country, and all the infrastructure that's been built, and the airport expansion, and just the sense, the culture of pride in being the oil and gas capital. But we also talked about some of the challenges around boom and bust cycle of the industry, oil price crashing and how that impacts the region, how maybe not all of the benefits have trickled down to the region with how the oil and gas industry has been set up in the UK. And then we've done the Measuring Just Transition report, where we looked at different themes and indicators for just transition, compiled the data. For some of the things, data was quite easy to compile, like earnings and jobs. And for some others, it was a bit more difficult, like democratic participation and community empowerment. But we did our best trying it. And these are the two reports that we have produced. This builds on some of the previous work that we've done around 2020, 2021 with Aberdeen Climate Action. During COVID, we were all stuck in our houses, and we did online workshops, asked people, what do you think just transition is? And we worked with communities, we worked with SMEs, and these are the 5 themes that came through quite strongly with what people thought just transition was. And of course, net zero jobs and skills are up there, but there were also other findings, such as community revitalization. We want community ownership of infrastructure and assets. We want to not have fuel poverty while we are surrounded by energy infrastructure, both fossil fuels and renewables. We want green spaces, which was particularly acute around COVID. And we want participation and empowerment. We want to make a real difference in decisions. And there is a framework to build us on. So as Elliot mentioned, the just transition principles are embedded in climate legislation in Scotland. We also have national just transition outcomes, which are 8 outcomes that the government is trying to achieve. The work that is happening now is how do we translate these outcomes into actual indicators, targets, and data-based outcomes. So that work is ongoing. And as Elliot mentioned as well, we have sectoral plans, and we're hoping to have sectoral plans, and we are expecting some regional plans. And there are some questions around that, like what is the appropriate scale? So for Grangemouth, for example, it would be probably making sense to have it at a bit smaller scale, because you have one anchor institution and community around it. Whereas in the Northeast, you have so many different players here. And you probably want to not just focus on Aberdeen City, look at Aberdeenshire, look at maybe parts of Moray as well. So there are a lot of questions that need to happen. There's also the Just Transition Fund for North East and Moray, which is in a bit of a state of disarray at the moment because, you know, we had a big first year, and then after that, it's now managed by the Scottish National Investment Bank. So you can only apply for finance rather than grants, which doesn't work for community groups, for example. So the 4 themes around which we compiled indicators were: first, employment, earnings, and skills; second, housing poverty and well-being; third, democratic participation; and fourth, community empowerment, revitalization, and net zero. And we came up with these 4 themes from looking at that previous graph that I showed you, the previous research that we've done. We have also looked at what are the just transition outcomes in a national planning framework, and it makes sense. It makes sense that it covers quite a wide range of things. And then we had some consultations. We had sessions with the local authorities, we had sessions with industry, with third sector organizations, and we came up with 20 indicators for which we compiled data. And as I mentioned, for some of them, the data is quite quantitative. So it's, you know, numbers, graphs, Excel, easy. And for others, it was a bit trickier, and we did more qualitative type indicators. So I'm just going to run through some of the data that we found. Don't have a lot of time. So this is not all of it, but this is some of it, and you can look up more of it online. So for employment, earnings, and skills, we look at generally at employment count. So how many people are employed, how many people are employed in different areas. And you can see Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, and then the trends. And of course, it's no surprise to anyone that, you know, we have that big dip after 2014, which is when we had a big oil price crash. Again, not a surprise. We already knew that. I think you've done something there.
That's it.
Okay. What we see is that, of course, the oil and gas employment is the one that's going down. So compare, you know, 2015 even to 2021, the oil and gas employment, direct employment in the region. So Aberdeen City, 25,000 to 17,000. Overall in the Northeast, 30,000 to 21,000. So even after 2015, we're not even talking about pre-oil price crash, we see that employment going down. And there are different things at play here. It's of course the oil price, but it's also the fact that we are a maturing province, that the production is going down naturally as our reserves go down as well. Now, if we move to the energy sector employment, so that is wider in scale, we see that it's going down, but not to the same extent that oil and gas. And that is because we have also the other energy employment, such as renewables. What we do see is that the rise in the employment in renewables is not quite supplementing for the loss of the jobs in the oil and gas sector. And there are many reasons for it. The first reason is it's just not developing fast enough. The second reason is that it's not that labor intensive. We don't have manufacturing here for renewables. We're talking construction jobs, some operation jobs. So the growth in the green energy sector is not quite happening as fast. Of course, when you have oil and gas, you have to develop it here. When you talk about green energy, you know, it can happen almost anywhere. So we need to make sure that we capitalize on being this energy capital. Now, moving on to housing, you see City of Aberdeen is the red one. This is the average price of housing. We are not going with the national trend. We are special. Housing prices in Aberdeen really follow the price of oil. And that is a huge impact on the region. We see that we have quite a lot of rented housing in the city. We don't have enough social housing, and we are in a bit of a housing crisis because homeowners are on this very unpredictable ride with the price of their house, but we also have a lot of people living in housing insecurity. We are in a housing crisis, as it was labeled in Grampian, I think in the press just a couple of weeks ago. In terms of health and well-being, we have quite big inequality in terms of health in the city, and I think that has been particularly acute around the debate about St. Fiddick's Park in Tory, where we see that people who live in more deprived zones have much less healthy life expectancy than people living in the West End in sort of richer, well-off areas. We also see that after 2015, the healthy life expectancy in Aberdeen has dropped much more than in the rest of the country. This requires further research into why exactly that was, but it coincides with this housing insecurity and economic insecurity that people are experiencing post the oil price crash as well. In terms of democratic participation and trust in institutions, what we have done is we worked with NESCAN in the Just Transition Communities project that Nicola will be talking about later, and we've done a survey of decision makers from the Aberdeen City Council, Aberdeen Shire Council, asking them, do you know anything about climate assemblies? Do you think that they can work? And we see that it's an emerging field. But we also looked at the surveys from the Aberdeen City Voice and a Scottish Household survey to ask to see what people say to questions such as, do you trust local government? Do you think that the council is good at listening? Do you think that you can influence decisions affecting my local area? Or do you want the greater involvement in the local area? And if you see that last graph, the orange is Aberdeen. So we see a huge spike in what people are saying about wanting to be involved. But if we look at the other graphs, for example, the lower left one, there's not a lot of people who think that the council is good at listening, less so than in other areas. So there is motivation, there is excitement about participating in local discourse, in making decisions, but maybe not a lot of trust that the institutions are doing a very good job of it currently. And this is the outcome of the survey with the decision makers. We see that people feel like, yes, it is important to have climate assemblies for future policy, but people are not quite sure how to do it because there is not really any framework for how climate assembly outcomes can be a formal consideration in things like local development plan. Moving on to community ownership, revitalization, we see that community ownership is not really great in the urban settings, but also in the poorer parts of Aberdeenshire. If you look at Aberdeenshire West, there is much more there. But if you look at the urban settings, Aberdeen South, we don't have a lot of community ownership from groups. If we think about community renewables, the situation there is quite dire as well. So we have a target in the Scottish policy to have local and community owned energy. We only have 2 community owned renewable energy projects in the city. So one of them is the Seaton Hydro that's on the picture. I've just been today to Udney Wind Farm, which is a first community-owned wind turbine in the whole of Britain. And they're doing a tremendous job there. And last year, the wind turbine generated £1 million in profit for the community, going directly into community trust. So while we have all this policy to want to have more community renewables, we don't really have the corresponding changes in legislation, in the practical things like getting a planning permission in an easier way. We don't have any subsidies. So a project like that today would not really take off because the feed-in tariffs have not been available since 2019, and Contracts for Difference, which is the main subsidy scheme for renewables in the UK, is only available for projects over 5 megawatt. And that project is only 800 kilowatt, for example. Sustainable and active travel was a huge issue in this. So this is just one of the graphs. So this is the average journey time by car or by public transport. And we are meant to be, increasing perhaps the car journey and decreasing the public transport journey, but it's going the other way around. We see we're building a lot of new roads. We have the Aberdeen bypass. The car journey is decreasing, but the public transport journey has increased in time over the last 5 years, and it takes more than twice the time to get on these 12 simple journeys by public transport than it does by car. And people want sustainable and active travel. People want to be able to walk around, to have safe paths to walk about as well. So where are we going next? We know that the Northeast is at the forefront of the net zero transition. We know that it needs to be the first region to do any kind of regional planning. What we lack currently is a common vision for just transition, a lot of competing narratives of what is happening. At the same time, there is a lot happening on just transition in the city and the region. A lot happening in the third sector with Friends of the Earth, with NESCAN, Aberdeen Climate Action, a lot happening within the trade unions and workers sphere as well, with the Just Transition Partnership and unions. taken initiative on this. Industry is having its own narrative development of the just transition, but we don't have a joint up vision. And hopefully that's something that the regional planning can pick up, but it needs to be a vision that represents everybody. And not just the usual interests. Something that is also a development to be aware of is all the community planning, so all the locality planning that is happening currently with the council as well. So if you are interested in that, there's currently an opportunity to develop locality plans in Aberdeenshire and Moray in the city as well. So if you want to plan more for community, with community, this is an initiative to start getting involved in. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't run over time too much. And I look forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.